face the fears and anxieties you have, because that's a healthy way to process them in my experience. Don't pretend they don't exist. Don't pretend you're not scared of some potential opportunity or some completely new path you're going to try to take. That's normal. But reframe it. Reframe it not as something that's going to paralyze you, not as something that's going to stop you from doing it, but something that's going to heighten your senses, get your antenna up, and ask yourself all the time. This was part of the conversation I had yesterday with a guest. What's the best that can happen? What's the worst that can happen? Probably neither. Probably going to be something in the middle. But we tend to focus sometimes on what's the worst that can happen, as unlikely as that is. And that is the source of a lot of people's fear and anxiety about change, about a crossroads, about having to reinvent themselves. I mean, so many people, probably some people listening right now, they had a door closed in their face. They didn't walk out it. It was closed on them. And they are now being forced to make a change, which feels scary. My experience is a lot of the best changes that we make are forced changes. They're not changes we would have made by voluntarily getting out of our comfort zone. We were forced out there. I could go on, I won't list them, but there have been many examples of that for me, where I might have kept going on this comfortable path, but it would have been the wrong thing. Yeah. And by having a door closed to me, ended up forcing me to go somewhere else. So, don't fear that.
All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Nick Carrier's Best You podcast. To say I'm fired up would definitely be an understatement today, but today I'm super fired up, super stoked to have the one and only Chris Fowler join me today. Chris, I just want to start off by saying thanks so much for joining me today.
My pleasure. You're bringing the energy. I'll do my best to match it. Good to be with you.
Of course. Yeah, I already taught a fitness class this morning, so I'm up and ready to go and everything like that. So if you guys know anything about college football, then you know who Chris Fowler is. But to give you a brief introduction, you're a broadcaster for ESPN, best known for hosting College Gameday for 25 years, and now you're the play-by-play announcer for ABC's Saturday Night Football game with Kirk Herbstreit. You also call tennis, you also call soccer, and you've been calling the Australian Open at some crazy hours here this past week or so. But you also have an awesome, pretty new podcast called Fowler Who You Got, and I've been listening to it a lot. I've loved the episodes with Kirk and the Bear, and with McConaughey. That one was awesome. And I just was recently listening to the Wellness Wisdom with Desmond and Gabby, and so there was some great podcasts to listen to. So you guys need to make sure you go check that out. But the way I want to start today, Chris, is that you went to University of Colorado. Like I already told you, my dad and my brother went there as well. And you were a sports director for the university radio station. And it seemed like pretty early on, you were doing some sports stuff. So when did you really know that you wanted to become a sports broadcaster?
It was way before college, actually. It was when I was about 10, 11 years old. My parents were not sports fans. They were in the arts. They didn't have much interest in sports except for the Olympics. We watched that as a family. But my grandmother was a huge sports fan. So I would get dropped off sometimes on the weekends at my grandparents' place. And this was in Illinois, outside of Chicago. So she would listen to the Cubs games on a little transistor radio in a folding chair in her backyard with a baseball scorebook. Now, only listeners of a certain age are going to know what a baseball scorebook is, let alone how to use it. She scored every game in the scorebook, listened to it on the radio. When it came to be hockey season, I was locked in the Chicago Blackhawks games. And I just thought, what could be better than conveying the excitement of that kind of sporting event to other people who were listening, who were just as excited, because I was in that listener position. And so I figured out really early on that would be a dream job, and just kind of pointed towards it. And by the time I got to college, I was all in. And my college experience was much more about accumulating practical knowledge and making connections than it was about going to class. But that's just me. I don't advise skipping as many classes as I did. But MSC was a good experience. And the radio station there was, by the way, it was like a little room, pretty crude. We didn't have the facilities that broadcast schools have now. But if you were inventive and scrappy, you could still get the practical knowledge to sort of try to prepare yourself for the career And that's what I did. I took every opportunity in college, including a sports talk show on that radio station you mentioned, and also a music shift, because I love music as much as sports. Since I was playing, the 80s kind of new wave of the time, and I had a great time. I mean, it was way more important to me than what I was learning in the classroom.
Yeah, I can relate a little bit to going back to the baseball book, because back when my brother, I have an older brother, like 2 years older than me, and back when he was playing and started at like 8, 9, 10 years old, like getting actually more serious into it, I chose to be and volunteered to be the bat boy for his team. And one of the things I also did was keep the book, and I thought that was a ton of fun. So I'm pretty young, but I can relate to that.
Could you do it today? Could you still score a baseball game correctly if you had to? I'm not sure I could still do it. It's been probably 40 years since I've seen a baseball scorebook. But
yeah, I remember. I mean, I feel like I could. I minimally, but probably not to its fullest extent.
Some people who are baseball announcers still keep if they're old enough, still keep that kind of baseball scorebook. They'll score the game as they call it, because that's a good shorthand way for them to look back. What happened in the third inning? That's not many younger guys do that, but the old timers, there's still a few that do that.
Yeah. So you said when you got into sports a little bit more because your grandparents were big into it. Did you see somebody calling sports and you were like, that really seems cool? Or did you like love playing sports yourself? Or like, what was it about like broadcasting in particular? Like, did you have a role model that you looked up to?
Well, there were guys that called the Chicago sports teams on the radio. Jack Brickhouse was the name of the Cubs broadcaster at the time, pre-Harry Carey. There's a guy called Lloyd Pettit who called the Chicago Blackhawks games. Blackhawks were a very good team, and they were always sort of like flirting with the Stanley Cup Finals. So it was very exciting. The Cubs were not so good. One of my earliest memories is 1969 when they choked the lead, and the Mets, the Miracle Mets, as they became known as, chased the Cubs down in the home stretch and passed them. That was a crushing defeat for a 7-year-old. You learned early what being a Cubs fan was about. But those two guys that called the radio for those two teams were my first sort of role models. I didn't really listen and say, I want to take their style. I just thought, wow, those guys are really passionate and they're really pumped up and they're having a great time doing this job. And as you would tell people, you find something you're passionate about, figure out a way to make a living doing it. And I just found a passion for that really young. Now, when I started watching television and looking at sports there were people like Jim McKay, who was the original host of the Olympics for ABC and brought such a humanity to it and was such a wonderful host, not just in the mechanics of delivering information, but the way he did it, giving you a feel of being there, giving you a feel for these athletes from all different countries as human beings who are living their dream and bringing that home. The storytelling aspect of what Jim McKay did made a huge impression on me, made me think that hosting the Olympics was the ultimate job. That very few things that from an early age, I said, that's what I want to do. But hosting the Olympics was one of them. It's a goal I've still since had to put on the sidelines, and I got to work later with Jim McKay in horse racing for ABC, sort of in the latter years of his career, which is an enormous thrill for me. But it wasn't like I saw all these guys on the TV and said, I'm going to do this, I'm going to be like that, and this and this. I mean, there were the main voices of the day. Kurt Gowdy would do the big TV games. Pat Summerall, would call the U.S. Open and football games, of course. But it wasn't like one of those guys made me want to do the job. It was more just the general feeling of what that must feel like to do the job.
Yeah. That's very cool. Yeah. And hopefully with the Olympics, we get back on track here when things start to open back up. But one of the things I learned, so you were kind of working for CBS and NBC affiliates back in Colorado from about 84 to 86. And 86 is when you made the jump over to ESPN, and you were going to start off being the host for Scholastic Sports America, which is kind of a high school sports show. But when you made the jump, I learned that you kind of got advice that might be a risky and unconventional move. And that it might be smarter just to stick at a local station and kind of work your way up. So
What gave you the courage or the belief or the faith that making this jump to ESPN was the appropriate move for you?
Yeah, I didn't feel like courage at the time, that's for sure. It was more just listening to my gut and clearing away the static and not heeding the advice of well-intentioned people who thought they were doing what's best for me, but just what felt right at the time. I mean, ESPN, I remember, was 7 years old, okay? It had not established itself as the worldwide leader in sports.
Yeah.
And it was this cable outfit that I had watched as a college kid for sure a lot, but didn't have the same profile in the business. So I got this call when I was working in Denver as kind of like a cub reporter and a producer. I would edit highlights, but I was going to do stories in the field as well. Never did anchoring. I was right out of school. So 1 year out of college was when I went to ESPN. And yeah, the Scholastic Sports America, I looked 11 years old, Nick, so I wasn't going to get to be put on SportsCenter. I thought when they called me SportsCenter, no. High school sports show, which was a startup, exciting, first of its kind. Emmitt Smith was the very first football player we ever profiled in episode 1 of the series. Yeah. So I got to be friends with him. All kinds of athletes like Lance Armstrong, became friends for life based on meeting him when he was at Plano, Texas, as a triathlete. So it was neat. It also taught me how to work hard, how to do a lot of different things. It applied a lot of the lessons that I try to impart on young people who want to get into this business. Be versatile, be open, and then listen to your gut, man. I mean, yeah, I was told, don't do that. Bad idea. Read scores at a local market, get your resume tape, repeat until you get to a bigger market. And it brings up another thing that I talk about too. I'm not sure if this is a lesson that you ever tried to deliver, but it's not important to figure out early on what exactly you want to do. Don't put that pressure on yourself. It's unrealistic. Try to figure out what you don't want your life to look like. That, to me, is more important at a young age. And I figured out that I did not want to be a sportscaster confined to just reading scores every night in the local news for 4 or 5 minutes. Not to demean that job. A lot of people love it. It's very stable compared to a lot of other jobs in the business. And I'm not talking it down. It just wasn't right for me. And I saw that very early on, that I wanted to do different kinds of things. I wanted to be involved in live event coverage or storytelling in a different way. And this is what Scholastic Sports sort of allowed me to do. These were 7-minute long form features. Here's a kid out of school with a cameraman and a field producer. Where do you want to go in the country? You got this giant book of stories that parents sent in. Hey, here's my kid is talented. My kid's got good grades. Come talk to us. And we would get these ideas as the show evolved, bombarded with them. We would just sit there and go, you know what? Let's go to San Diego. Let's go to Seattle. And sometimes you go to Peoria too, but it was an amazing opportunity to sort of have the freedom and the autonomy. Our office was in a little trailer. We weren't even in ESPN's building. ESPN, by the way, had 2 buildings back then. Now it's about 20. And we were in a trailer outside of the building. That was the office of this show. So I would, live out there. You venture into the main newsroom, and there's Chris Berman and Bob Lee and the legends of ESPN at that time. And who is this kid in a T-shirt? And what does he think he's doing here? It was hazing, but it helps you grow too. But that was just, I didn't care about any of that, the trappings of the job or money. It was just about getting experience and growing. And after doing that for 2 years, some other opportunities came along, like getting into college football as a sideline reporter and a reporter for Gameday. So that was a great launching pad. And my message is, listen to your gut, man. You know what's best for you, or if you don't, you're going to learn to. You make mistakes, you learn. But I think it's then you own your own mistakes. If you listen to people's advice and do what they tell you to do, especially in something like this, Nick, this business, which is changing, evolving, you know what? I think you can end up in a place where you don't want to be, doing stuff you don't want to do. And you're going to lose that flame of the passion that you had for the job. So whatever way people need to calm themselves, find the stillness, tune out the static. That's the only way I think your gut comes through.
Yeah.
And I'll say this, I've made some bad decisions in real estate, in stocks, thankfully not in a marriage, made a great decision there. But my career batting average, in terms of listening to my gut, when I'm lucky enough to have different opportunities, options, I don't regret one single decision I made because it's been for the right reasons.
Yeah.
No, I think that's really key, and being able to own your own mistakes if you do make a mistake. And then I really liked what you said earlier on in regards to you don't you don't have to know what you want to do long term. It's really important to know what you don't want to do, and I actually can relate to that on a very high level because I studied finance and insurance in college. So I thought like that's probably what I'm going to go do. But I started doing fitness training in college as well, and that's when I was like, I love this thing, and I kind of want to go do it long term. But I was like, I don't really know what it's going to look like long term, so I'm going to go do this first, and so this is what I should do. And then I started that, and right away I was like, wait, why am I wasting time doing something I know I don't want to do long term when I could just be figuring out what I do want to do long term right now?
And I don't have to know what it's going to look
really
like.
Overrated, man. I think the idea of long term is so overrated. I do think that we're almost taught from birth to focus on the future. To do now will get you ready. And everything we do, we walk around in preparation, as opposed to just being in the moment and figuring out what can I do better today that'll prepare me for the future, but I'm not thinking about that. So when you're in high school, all you're doing is preparing for college, right? That's what they drill into your head. When you're in college, you're preparing for the real world.
Yeah.
And a lot of times,
and in the real world, you're preparing for retirement.
Yeah, we're always preparing for something that's next.
Yeah.
And then you prepare to retire, then you prepare to die.
Yeah.
Why not just be present, be in the moment, and focus on what you're doing every day to get better? I know you believe in this, consistent, relentless, incremental improvement. That's what it is. Don't sit there and stress about the future, right? The future is unknowable. It's uncontrollable. Control is largely an illusion. Not to get too deep early. I'm sure we'll go places with this conversation, but I really do. I do believe that we want to feel like we have control. No, we don't. Yeah. We don't. You have control over how you behave. I believe you have control over what you think. You should be able to control your thoughts and hopefully to a certain degree control your feelings, but you can certainly control your habits and your behavior and your work ethic and your energy and things like that. And those are always controllable. Those are what you count on. Do not, young people, listen to this, do not freak out and stress about the future. Mm-hmm. Your life will go by way too fast and you're going to have regrets that you missed opportunities if that's where you put your mind all the time.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think one of the things that you said in there is you can control your energy. And to me, it comes down to when you think about how do we actually not worry about the future. To me, you're going to give energy to something. You're going to give energy to what does the future look like, or you're going to give energy to like, how do I be successful today? And to me, it's like, just try to channel as much energy to being present and how can I be successful today, and then worry about tomorrow when tomorrow's going to come.
I know I enjoy your content. I know that's the message you drive home. There's very few things that are more important to express to people. And I know it doesn't feel like sometimes in our current condition when there's nothing but time and inactivity is driving people crazy, and boredom and the feeling of helplessness and anxiety, all that kind of stuff. That message is sort of needed now more than ever, because even though the present feels sometimes claustrophobic or restrictive or frustrating, it's no less important to focus on exactly what you can do today to get better and how to use the time and where to put your energy.
Yeah, no doubt.
No doubt. Well, I want to make a little bit of a transition into the College Gameday stuff. So you got there in '86, a couple years with Scholastic Sports America, another couple years as kind of a sideline reporter with college football. And then in 1990, college is when you started College Gameday. But like you had talked about, ESPN had only been around for 7 years essentially before you got there. And I think a lot of young people, including me, don't really realize how far College Game Day has come since the beginning, from being inside and not being on the road. And honestly, it sounds like your experience with Scholastic Sports America and the creativity that job and that role allowed you to really flourish with Game Day and give you a lot of the creativity with that moving forward. But question I want to ask you is, what was y'all's original vision for Game Day going into it in 1990?
Man, I don't even know if there was a vision. If Game Day is now a Walmart, think about that.
Yeah.
What it was in 1990 was a mom and pop grocery store on the corner. Okay. It was a show nobody watched. It was a show that led into football games at noon Eastern that nobody watched. It was a half hour long. It was in the studio. It was about 3 years old when I got the gig. So it seems like, wow, you know, College Game Day and you were 27. Yeah, but nobody wanted to host College Game Day. It was not desirable, man. So I did. I wanted to host it. The year before, the host of the show had to suddenly leave. His wife was giving birth. I get a call on Friday. Get in here. We got a meeting. You're going to host Game Day tomorrow. And I had done features for the show and I had done sidelines. So I was in the sport. I had not done a lot of anchoring at that point at ESPN. Hadn't done yet Sports Center, things like that. But, okay, what are you going to do? Opportunity knocks. You don't say no. So I went in there. I never forget this. Some in your audience are not going to have any idea who Beano Cook was, because he's a very crusty old broadcaster who'd been around for a long time. He was part of that Game Day as one of the pundits. And he sat there in this meeting before my first show as a fill-in. And look, Fowler, look at you down there. This is how we talk. Look at you down there. You're shitting your pants. You have no idea. You're not ready for this. You're not going to sleep tonight. You know, and everybody's laughing. And I'm laughing along. That was his, you know, that was their hazing. That was their indoctrination, right? So he was wrong. I did sleep. I got up. I did just fine. No pants for shit. It went good. And then the next year when the job came open, I was the host. But that audition there, if I'd flunked it, different path in life. So, you know the old saying, luck is where preparation meets opportunity. I had my opportunity. Fortunately, I was prepared enough and pulled off the performance to make myself look like a guy who could host the show. And the next year I did. But it took about 3 years to get Game Day on the road. And those early years, we're just a studio show, went from 30 to 60 minutes. Finally, we convinced them to take this thing on the road one time in 1993 when Florida State and Notre Dame played a 1-2 game in South Bend. We didn't know what we were doing. We plopped the desk down in the lobby of the basketball arena, covered the pep rally the night before, which is a big deal at Notre Dame, and then did this show with a bunch of people standing behind a velvet rope, but right there, that close to us, wondering, what the hell, what's going on, And we kind of got through it, but knew we had something. And the next year and the next year and the next year, we began to go on the road more and more and more, and the show totally changed. So we didn't have that vision when we started, but we saw along the way those lightning bolt moments where, okay, this is what this could be. And man, is this fun? First of all, like we're thinking more, what's better than being on the scene of the biggest games? I didn't have to call the game, or I didn't get to call the game, depending how you look at it. I wasn't ready to call the game professionally, but I got to go stand on the sidelines and watch ringside all of these epic games, including the championship games. And so that was what it was about. This is enjoyable. This is fun. And then the company sort of, realized, okay, this is also really lucrative. We're making a lot of money with this show. Sponsors want to jump on board with this. And the energy of the crowd behind the set became a character in the show and became what set the show apart from everything else.
Yeah. I mean, I've probably been to 5, 6, 7, 8 College Game Days myself, and the energy is parallel to
nothing.
You really? You were in the crowd standing out there in the back, or did you have any special accesses?
No ever special access, but yeah, I've been to a number of them. But yeah, oh yeah, it's a ton of fun, one of the things, one of the, and it's funny because I didn't write it down. It just struck with me. It struck a chord with me so hard when I think it was on like one of your Instagram stories or one of your videos that you talked about in regards to like preparation. You were talking about preparing for maybe a game or preparing for game day, just preparation in general and how important it is. And you said that you can't over prepare, but you can overuse your preparation. And that to me really resonated with me in regards to like doing interviews, because sometimes if I overuse my preparation, I'm too focused on the questions that I wanted to ask rather than the conversation that we're actually having. But I just kind of want you to riff a little bit on the importance of preparation and what it kind of looked like with College Gameday, because I'm sure it evolved over the years, but once you got to so many games, a lot of different interviews, so many different kids' names, their high schools, where they're from, and all these kinds of things, like what did preparation mean to you and what did it kind of look like before a game day?
Yeah, I mean, I think that every single person you talk to who's successful, regardless of what field they're in, would talk about preparation if they're being honest. No one gets to where they want to go without preparation. Doesn't matter what you do. This is I'm holding up the notes for a podcast interview I'm doing later today. I've known the guest 25 years, right? I've known Eddie George, Heisman winner, NFL star, for 25 years. But I got pages of notes like this because that's what you do. You prepare. You think about different ways to say something, different directions to take the conversation. You don't rely on the fact that you think you know this person. You know, I was talking to Matthew McConaughey on my podcast. People think of McConaughey as being this freewheeling, instinctive actor. You know, he doesn't put a lot of thought into it. He just riffs. He did when he started, but then he got burned. And there's a story he tells, I mean, a really humiliating experience where he thought he could wing it. He came in unprepared and embarrassed himself and said, never again. And I talked to comedians, musicians, actors, obviously broadcasters. Preparation. Laurence Olivier, arguably the greatest actor ever, certainly on stage, said that you have to have the humility to prepare, then the confidence to perform. Because grinding away and preparing is not romantic. It's not always that exciting. It's getting in there in the trenches, but it's essential. And if you put the preparation in, you should have the confidence to do the job. I tell kids preparation is confidence. Without the first, you can't have the second. And I'm talking about at this stage of my career, 30 years doing this. I can fake it, but I know I'm faking it. And I know that deep down, that doesn't feel right to me. And also I know there are customers savvy enough to know when you're bluffing your way through something that you didn't really prepare for as you should have. So that's controllable, right? That's one of the things we can always control. You can control your focus and your energy and where you put your mind. So yes, preparation is essential. You learn how to prepare more efficiently over time. I don't mean more hours of prep is better, not necessarily. And preparation, as you know, is multifaceted. Like you might, if you're going to teach a class, you're going to give something where you have to be tuned in and aware and have lots of mental energy, but it's also a performance, right? Maybe the best thing is not to look at your notes for an extra half hour. Maybe it's to go for a walk, get a workout in, clear your mind. I like to meditate. It's whatever gets you in the proper frame of mind when the light goes on, because you don't get paid for your preparation or your rehearsal, right? It's all what goes into the actual broadcast. When the lights are on in our life, whatever we do, that's what you're expected to perform at your best. But you got to get ready for it. But just because you have good preparation also doesn't guarantee anything. You have to bring that second piece to it. You have to have the confidence and just execute in the moment. Because there's been games I really prepared well for, but the call was shitty. I didn't rise to the moment. I wasn't tuned in. I maybe had too much information in my head, and I didn't find that place of relaxed intensity is what I call it. And when I've said that phrase to people, they nod their head, whether they're playing music live or it's intensity for sure, but it doesn't feel intense to others. It feels relaxed. And it takes a long time sometimes to arrive at that. If people, it's sort of our version of being in the zone.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I think, like you said, everybody's preparation can look a little bit different and it can be multifaceted. I think one of the big things is you have to be self-aware about your preparation. And if something went really well, if you call it a really good game, you have to have the savvy to go back and be like, okay, how did I prepare for this? What worked this time around? And maybe I should replicate that the next time around. Or if you were really nervous and you didn't feel like it went well, then maybe I needed to have that quiet time beforehand. Maybe I needed to meditate. Maybe I needed to go on a walk or whatever it was. So I think self-awareness around how your preparation allows you to perform or not perform is key as well.
Totally. How you're feeling in that moment. First of all, we could talk for a day about self-awareness. It all starts with that. If you're not aware of yourself and the vibes around you, nothing comes from it. I mean, it's, again, I say leadership starts with awareness. You can't be a good leader. You can't expect people to listen to your message and follow you. Say if you're not aware of them, keenly aware of them, and only from that place can you get the compassion and the empathy and the understanding and the wisdom that you need to lead. And because I read a good quote, management is about doing policies, decisions. Leadership is about being. It's how you are, how you make people feel. And I think that all starts with awareness. So what you said about just being aware of what brings out the best in yourself and what doesn't. Like I did a podcast interview yesterday. I was stressed about stuff, nothing to do with the interview. It was one of those days where shit was just crowding into my mind. It was not going to help me do what we're doing right now. So I went out for a walk. It was a little chilly. I went down by the Hudson River and I walked around and I just completely cleared my mind, was present, looked at the river, looked at the sun shining up the buildings, and just focused in on things that were in front of me and cleared my mind. And also I did my Wim Hof deep breathing exercises, which I use to kind of meditate and regulate. And so those two things got me in the frame of mind that the conversation went well. Had I not been aware that that's what I should do, if I'd sat there and looked at my notes and been a grinder right up until the time the interview started, I don't think it would have gone as well. But you have to know yourself well enough.
Right. And I think this is such an important topic. So I want to go a little bit deeper into something that I've thought about in regards to learning from your winning. Like everybody talks about learning from your losses and learning from your failures is super important, which it is. But I also think like learning from your winning is just as important, if not more important, because the time that I had this like light bulb moment is when I start thinking the Patriots win every single year. Alabama wins every single year. There's these teams that win every single year. And my thought was like, I think they're just really self-aware as to what made them successful, that they know what they need to replicate, or maybe obviously it's not the same every single year. There's tweaks that need to be made every single year. But to me, do you feel like that's part of why Nick Saban and Alabama win every single year and why dynasties happen is because teams are really aware of what makes them be successful and then they kind of try to replicate it?
1,000%. And they don't deviate from it. They know what the plan is. They know what works, and they have the discipline to continue to do it. I mean, Nick would tell you that you're defying human nature in some ways, which is hard to do. We're all wired a certain way. When we have success, we get a little happy, a little satisfied. We dial back. We believe in our head. We're telling ourselves, you've done this. And then you start to think about how to cut corners. That's the dangerous part. That's what he works against. Saban, we've had conversations about tennis because he's fascinated with players like Federer and Nadal and Djokovic and Serena who achieved so much. They're the most accomplished, yet they also appear to be the hungriest. They seem to want it more even at their stage of their career, than people who've never had it even once. And that's what Nick was tuning in on. How do you keep players who've achieved a lot hungry and motivated? And I mean, his method is not what I would like to do as a human, because I like to enjoy my success. You said celebrating success, cherishing it, allowing yourself to feel something more than just momentary satisfaction for a success. When a loss is devastating, think about going through life where you're gutted by your losses, but merely satisfied by your wins. That's not any fun. Bill Snyder, there's a million coaches probably most coaches are like that. But now some of them are learning to celebrate the wins, to allow themselves the enjoyment of the moment without shutting down and fearing that if I celebrate this, it means I'm less likely to succeed the next time. No. You can't let that, you can't be thinking Wednesday about the win on Saturday. You got another game. Of course not. But in the moment, allow ourselves the freedom to just celebrate when things have gone well and we've done something we're proud of.
Yeah. There's definitely some sort of balance in there that everybody's got to find that works for themselves. One of the things that I've found fascinating is you've called game day under some pretty extreme circumstances after like emotional things that happened in the country. Virginia Tech, for example, when there was a shooting there, you had a game day. After that, then after 9/11, then after the Penn State scandal and all these things. What is it like to try to create a positive, energetic atmosphere?
Also try to catch the emotion of the moment. What's kind of the balance there to make sure you do that appropriately as like a public figure calling something, to try to catch the kind of the saddened moment, but also try to create positivity?
It's a good question. It's complicated. I don't think you try to create positive energy. I think your responsibility is to document what's going on. Sometimes the energy is poignant. Sometimes it's respectful. Some of the shows you mentioned, it was pretty sad and mournful at times. But you document that and you find a way in a 2 or 3 hour pregame show that's not going to be one note and one emotion for that long. You must pivot. You must transition and reflect what's going on in other places around the country. But the game day shows that captured those different kinds of emotions do stick in my memory more than a lot of the routine ones where it was celebratory. Hey, it's a big game. Where else on the planet right now would you want to be than here doing this? I mean, that was the prevailing emotion at a lot of game day shows. But there were times where that wasn't the mood, that wasn't supposed to be the mood. And we felt a responsibility to get that right. And just be a human being in the moment and be aware, goes back to awareness, and prepare. We prepared a lot, Nick, for the show at Virginia Tech, which is the best example of that. It was the first time the university had come together as a family since the shootings to do something other than mourn. And it was the shootings were in the spring. This was the following football season. The campus was back together, and there was the opening game. It wasn't a big game per se. The opponent didn't even matter. But game day wanted to be there to document it and wanted to do it right. We had a very good relationship with the campus at Virginia Tech. I had, I think, a very strong understanding of what that place was about, what it was feeling, why a tragedy at that particular place felt different than had it happened somewhere else. And so we set out to construct this pregame show that would reflect all of that as best we could, and felt a real obligation to do it right and to do them proud, knowing that at the end of the show, they're going to kick a game off. So you got to go from they're coming together and this is how powerful this is, and this is why this is important. And then by the end of the show, it's football. So you make that journey. We walked a camera through the long tunnel into Lane Stadium, very dark, walking out into the lightness. That's how we came on the air. Obviously, the metaphor is clear. And I think that by the time I'd finished with this copy and talked about the Hokie Nation drawing strength from each other, being back together to celebrate something, to not let their campus be defined by a hideous act from one individual, but by what they wanted to define it as. They were going crazy. The energy had completely shifted. I get a little emotional just thinking about it because I'm very proud of what we did. And I think we were able to do that a few times in game day, whether it was at the Service Academy, post September 11th. There were other examples of that. But for me, that Virginia Tech show will always stick out. And we continue to get people who are alums of that school or fans of the program many years later come up and say how appreciative they are. And there's no better feeling than that.
Yeah, no, I think that's really cool to be able to harness the emotion of the moment in a way that uplifts the people that you want to uplift. So I think that's really cool and really special. But I think one of the things that you said too is like, be a human in the moment. I think sometimes people might going into that situation like that might overthink, how am I supposed to react in this? But just be a human in the moment and just kind of feel what everybody else is feeling.
When we brought Game Day on the air, I never scripted it because of what you said. I wanted to be able to feel what was authentic right there. So we're at LSU and they're playing Florida and it's October. I apologize. There apparently is a minor construction project. This is part of New York apartment living, but
all good.
I don't know if the pounding is going to continue. We'll just have to power through it. Sorry.
That's all good.
No, I think that sometimes it is just a pure celebration. Sometimes it's like, we have arrived. We're in the big time. Sometimes it's like, we got to pay them back. We've waited all year for this opportunity. Whatever it is, you can feel it in the crowd. When you walk around, you're on campus for a couple of days. You're out there. I never wrote down what I wanted to say when we came on the air for Game Day. You know, some parts of the show, you knew on Wednesday, Thursday, what you might want to say about this particular game, or you led into a feature and you want the director to know kind of where I'm going with this. So that would be written on a card. The beginning of the show was generally just, if I scribbled something down, it was on my format in a pen just before we came on the air, because you want to be a human in the moment. But again, you get to that place only through experience and preparation and being confident enough that the words will come to you if you just let them.
Yeah.
And if you get freaked out, I don't know what I'm going to say. I have nothing to say. I got to script all this out so they have a security blanket and I don't want to do this tightrope act because I might screw up. Ultimately, in any job, whatever it is, you have to progress from fearing a mistake, just letting it rip and making it about being as excellent as you can be without fear of failure. I remember there was like a turning point moment. There was a real place in my career where I went from fearing mistakes to just performing it. It was doing SportsCenter night after night after night, and you finally get to a point where, geez, check off that segment, didn't mispronounce anything there, didn't flub a line, got through that segment. Now let's go to the next segment. I mean, that's part of anything we learn, to do. Yeah. But you got to get beyond that. You can only really be good at this job once you forget about fearing mistakes and just let it go. Yeah,
and you can bring that relaxed intensity like you mentioned earlier. But two more quick questions. I want to make sure I get you out of here on time. I'm just very curious about this. Like, obviously, Game Day is live television, and play-by-play announcing is live television, and some crazy things can happen, especially on Game Day with Corso dropping an F-bomb. And you told a story in one of your podcasts about right before you guys go live in Oklahoma State, the cowboy shoots off guns, and there's like plenty of just kind of things that catch you off guard probably on Game Day and maybe by play-by-play announcing. And I think it's really important for any of us when we might be caught off guard that we don't react, but we respond somewhat intelligently to the situation. So I want you just a quick couple minutes to make sure I get you out of here on time. How do you have the coolness and the confidence and the calmness to be able to respond rather than like frantically react, if you will, when some of those unpredictable things might happen?
Yeah, well, I think it does come from experience. Sometimes there's no substitute for just having done it for a while and trusting yourself in the moment. Way more things can happen describing a live event than a pregame show. I mean, game day had its moments, but every time you step to the mic in a tennis match, when you think you've seen everything, you have not.
Yeah.
Pretty soon, Serena Williams is being given a penalty because her coach may or may not have said something. Arthur Ashe Stadium is melting down. She's smashing a racket. She's getting defaulted. And now Naomi Osaka is receiving a trophy at a huge moment for her life with the crowd booing. You know, they're playing as we record this, they're playing tonight, by the way. So anything can happen there. Anything can happen on a football field. So it's just having awareness. I think if you are in a place of relaxed intensity, you're observing keenly. You might not think there's as much observation in calling a tennis match as a football game. 2 people versus 22 people. But when I'm calling a tennis match, I'm literally watching everything that's going on. The spin of the ball in every shot, facial expressions. Then you're looking at your stats and your notes, and it's complete focus and immersion. So that when something happens in front of you, hopefully, listen. I mean, I'm not saying you couldn't lose your cool. But I go into these things. Like I'm telling you, I go into these things thinking about what if there's an attack in the stadium? What if something awful happens? I mean, I show up at Wimbledon knowing the history of terrorism in Britain. Okay? When I hosted the World Cup, it was about 9-10 months of preparation. A lot of it was on the what ifs. But I mentioned this in our production meetings. Anybody can prepare for the expected outcome. It's getting ready for the what ifs. What if Serena loses this match? What if Alabama gets blown out by Clemson in the championship game? Nobody thought that was possible. And then there are the what. I don't spend a lot of energy thinking about what if there's a tragedy, but I've thought about it in the past. I have that well of information so that you can step up when odd things happen. And you can unfortunately be presented with a tragedy on the football field. Players not moving. And many, many people have said the wrong thing or said it in the wrong way and been insensitive or gotten too emotional. I mean, so it's trusting yourself. It comes with an experience, but it's also thinking about it in advance so that you're not completely caught off guard. So anytime you go into something, and I think that this could apply to things far beyond calling sports games, think about the what ifs, not dwell on it, not obsess on it, but put some thought on it so that if it happens, it's not going to be, oh my God, I never would have imagined that. I thought about it for a minute and here's why I was ready for that.
Yeah. No, I've interviewed an Air Force fighter pilot a year and a half ago, and one of the things that was huge in their preparation is preparing for what could go wrong, preparing for the contingencies so that if it does go wrong, then they know how they can quickly respond. And
that's real world stuff. That's way different than calling a tennis match. I mean, I hope those guys are thinking about the what ifs.
But like you said, it's applicable to a lot of different things.
I really do think it is, yeah.
But before I ask the last question here, Chris, real quick, I want to acknowledge you for being able to trust your gut back when you were 25 or so, when you made the jump over to ESPN, to be able to trust your gut. And then I think that you thought you were going to be maybe a Sports Center anchor right away, but being able to be put in this job where you had so much creativity and could travel and do different things like that, I really do. And you learned hard work. I really feel like that set you up for success for College Game Day. It prepared you for that and allowed you to help grow College Game Day to what it is today, to that big Walmart like you described earlier. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think people should just, face the fears and anxieties you have, because that's a healthy way to process them in my experience. Don't pretend they don't exist. Don't pretend you're not scared of some potential opportunity or some completely new path you're going to try to take. That's normal. But reframe it. Reframe it not as something that's going to paralyze you, not as something that's going to stop you from doing it, but something that's going to heighten your senses, get your antenna up, and ask yourself all the time. This is part of the conversation I had yesterday with a guest. What's the best that can happen? What's the worst that can happen? Probably neither. Probably going to be something in the middle. But we tend to focus sometimes on what's the worst that could happen, as unlikely as that is. And that is the source of a lot of people's fear and anxiety about change, about a crossroads, about having to reinvent themselves. I mean, so many people, probably some people listening right now, have had a door closed in their face. They didn't walk out it. It was closed on them. And they are now being forced to make a change, which feels scary. My experience is a lot of the best changes that we make are forced changes. They're not changes we would have made by voluntarily getting out of our comfort zone. We were forced out there. I could go on. I won't list them, but there have been many examples of that for me where I might have kept going on this comfortable path, but it would have been the wrong thing. Yeah. And by having a door closed to me ended up forcing me to go somewhere else. So, don't fear that. Don't fear that, and try to, as hard as it is, as anxious as you are, and it's real when you don't have money to pay the mortgage or put food on the table. That's real. And I'm not in that position. I'm grateful every day for it. But in my view, it doesn't change the equation. It doesn't change the method of dealing with it. Take deep breaths, try to take the stress out of it. Try to be present in the moment. What can I do today? Don't worry about what might happen in 3 months or 6 months. I mean, it's normal to have those thoughts. You need to do things today that will help you 3 months and 6 months or 3 days down the line. But don't let that paralyze you, because you can't do anything if you're paralyzed. Fear can be a really healthy motivator. If you talk to people who are creative people or people in sports, I mean, that kind of fear that they acknowledge and let in and process, but don't let it paralyze them, can be a really positive thing. So there's a lot. I mean, I don't pretend to have the answers. I try not to be preachy. I try not to say you must, you should. I just try to give ideas and say, hey, this has worked for me. Consider this, try it. Maybe there's something useful, which I think is the best possible approach.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the reasons why your content is so easy to watch it and fun to watch, because like you said, you're trying to impart like what you've experienced yourself. And I really love the idea of reframing your fear. But I want to make sure I get you out. You guys need to make sure you go listen to his podcast, Fowler, Who You Got. I already mentioned some of the guests that I've listened to and some of the guests he's had on, and I know he's just going to continue to have on great guests. Like you said, he's getting ready to interview Eddie George here. You guys make sure you follow him on Instagram as well. One of my favorite follows personally, at Chris Fowler, and on Twitter at CB Fowler. But last thing real quick, Chris, is I think that getting closer to the best version of yourself is both a constant journey, and I think it's a unique journey. I think that the way that I'm going to get closer to the best version of myself is a little bit different than the way that you're going to get closer to the best version of yourself. So for you personally, if you could currently do 3 things to get closer to that best version of Chris Fowler that you could possibly be, then what are those 3 things that you could currently do or currently work on?
I need to give compliments better. I need to verbalize the things that I'm thinking. My wife tells me that all the time. She's actually right.
I've got to tell you one thing, just because you said that. That's literally what I'm doing for Lent. That's literally what I'm doing for Lent, trying to compliment somebody one time a day.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean being false. I mean, I'm just remembering to express to others what you're feeling, because I practice gratitude, but I don't do it in such a way to put it out loud or repeat it or write it down. That works great for people. That's not what I do. But as long as you're remembering to be grateful every day and expressing it, whatever works for you is best. But compliments are different, because you need to express them. Other people need to hear them to get that nourishment, to understand how you're feeling. So that is certainly, one thing is to be more expressive and say what I'm thinking when it's helpful to the other person. You want two more things to be the best version of myself?
Yeah, two more quick
I
things.
think what you said, I do think that it being about a direction, not a destination. So I really embrace fitness. I love it, but there's no goal in mind. I'm not trying to look this way or weigh this much or, run this fast. That's not what it's about for me. It's just about the experience of, first of all, the feeling I get when I'm doing it, and the idea that I'm showing up every day and I'm committing and having the consistency and the discipline. I mean, fortunately, those two things, consistency and discipline, at this point in my life, I'm at 58. You learn a lot of hard lessons and make a lot of mistakes, but at this point, I don't think it's hard for me to have those things. So just remembering that, just continuing to remember it. And also, I'm lucky that I love it. So things that are healthy, that are good for you, find a way to do those that you also like. There's a lot of ways to get exercise. You don't have to hate what you do. If you hate running on a treadmill, don't, because ultimately you won't stick with it. And why do something that you hate? There are other things that can achieve the same thing that you might not hate. So that's it. I mean, life's too short to do things we hate because they're good for us, when we can find things we also like that are good for us, because then your life's going to be happier. And I think I don't have to transform in certain ways. I just have to constantly remind myself, to be present, because it's very easy to slip out of that. And I think that, gratitude is what we talked about, but it doesn't need to be, I'm grateful for my family or my health. Yes, those are the basic things. That's what everything starts. But there are small things that I notice that I'm aware of. I'm very grateful for nature. So it might be walking outside and feeling fresh air. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for the way that the sun looks when it reflects on the mountain that's across from my house in Colorado, or on the Hudson River over here, or on the side of a building. You just take note of that, and stop, be aware, notice, and just, be grateful for small things, because it's not just the big things. It's the small little things that are worth being grateful for, that kind of make every day a little bit richer, right?
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I'm grateful for your time today, and I appreciate being gracious with your time. And three great things there, Chris. Absolute honor to have you on today. Good luck calling Serena's match tonight. Appreciate it.
Keep up the great work. I enjoy your content as well, Nick. Enjoy being with you.
Thank you.